everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Liz Bridgewater, the Director of Outreach at Climate Action Now. It will be just a few moments while people continue to gather. While we're waiting for folks to join, I invite you to answer the icebreaker question that you'll see pop up on your screen in just a moment. All right, so you should be seeing that question now. Our icebreaker today is, where are you joining from, and what's one climate trend or piece of news that's given you hope lately? If you're feeling up for it, please also share your video so we can all see each other today. We will be recording this event and it will be available publicly online. We'll also send out the recording after this event. I'm very grateful that everyone has joined today because even though the news has been upsetting for multiple reasons lately, there is still hopeful information about the climate. We just don't hear enough about it. So thank you for joining us today for a review of the most hopeful climate trends from 2025. I'll now turn things over to Kaylee Beam, Director of Content at CAN. Over to you, Kaylee.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kaylee Beam, and I'm the Director of Content at Climate Action Now. Love to see where people are joining from. Keep those answers coming. I know we're still kind of warming up as everyone gets settled in the Zoom room, but already seeing some comments about balcony solar, progress in solar and storage. Yeah, I think clean energy, we can all agree, is kind of one of the most hopeful things we've got going on right now. And replacing single-use plastic, that's great too. So yeah, keep those answers coming. We love to see where everyone's joining from, what's keeping you hopeful ahead of what is going to be a very hopeful hour. But before we get started, I'm going to get us all ready to take some action. And all of the actions you're going to see today actually come from our Daily Dose of Climate Hope, which is our Substack newsletter, and are authored by today's speaker, Sam Matty-Coast himself. So if you've been with us for one of these events recently, you already know about the CAN Action Carousel, and that's what we'll be using to take action today. This web-based version of the Climate Action Now app makes it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to business leaders and political decision makers. It offers an endless stream of actions, measures your impact, and lets you earn points towards the planting of real trees. And the best part is that any environmental organization, local chapter of a larger group, or community group that wants to scale up their impact can get one, whether they have their own website or not. And also, I love that I'm seeing the chat popping off now, so keep those answers coming, everybody. So I'm going to share my screen and show you just how easy it is to take action with the carousel, and you should be seeing it shortly. All right, so this is one of many actions that's going to be available for you to take today, and I'm going to show you just how easy it is to take an action. It only takes 3 clicks. First, you click Do It Now. Then you choose how you want to contact the decision maker you're reaching out to. In this case, I just have the email option, so that's what I'm going to click. And because I put in my address, the app knows who my state, federal, and in some cases local officials are. All you have to do is click send, and this is not my real address, don't worry. All you have to do is click send, and then you've taken action. All right, so it's really that easy. And earlier I mentioned earning points toward a real tree. And so far the Climate Action Now community has planted over 400,000 trees together, which is pretty incredible. So for those of you who want to access the carousel on your computers, feel free. Hold on, we got to go over here first. All right, so for those of you who want to take action on your computers, feel free to just type in this short link, and I will also drop that in the chat so you have easy access to the carousel. Otherwise, if you prefer to take action on your phone or tablet, just point your camera at the QR code box, wait for the little pop-up to appear, and tap on it to get to the carousel. Regardless of where you're taking action from, your messages will be counted in our goal tracker. You can already see the globe starting to fill in and that counter starting to iterate. If you've never used the carousel, you'll have to put in some basic information like your name, address, and email, and you'll also be encouraged to set a personalized message. For those of you who already have app accounts but are using the carousel for the first time, don't worry, you won't have to start from scratch. When you enter your email, you'll be prompted to enter a verification code, and once you do that, it will transfer all your progress from the app to the carousel. And if you're a die-hard app user, we appreciate you, and you'll still be able to access today's campaign there under a year in review in the campaigns tab. All right, that's all from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but turn my camera into the goal tracker so you still have access to it. And now I'll hand things back over to Liz to introduce our speaker and get things started. Over to you, Liz.
Thanks so much, Kaylee. Today, Sam Matty-Coast, the editor-in-chief at Climate Action Now, will be sharing a review of the most hopeful climate trends from 2025. Sam authors the Dose of Climate Hope Substack newsletter for Climate Action Now. Dose of Climate Hope illustrates new technologies, policy solutions, people, and trends that give us reason to be hopeful about the climate. Throughout 2025, Climate Action Now has tracked hopeful, positive trends in humanity's civilization-wide effort to build a better Anthropocene. We're seeing unprecedented world-changing growth in solar and battery technology deployment, an international surge in rewilding, an imminent peak in global carbon emissions, and rapid innovations to sustain agriculture, among many other positive developments. We'll now transition into our live interview. As you hear from Sam, please type any questions you'd like to contribute to the discussion into the chat box. Over to you, Sam.
Hi, folks, and thanks for being here with us today. 2025 was a heck of a year, especially for people living in America, as I believe most of us are. Horrible stuff happened, but the world is a very, very big and complex place, and a lot of horrible stuff and awesome stuff can happen at the same time. And even though it didn't make the headlines for some fairly understandable reasons, some really truly amazing civilizationally important progress has been made on climate change in recent years, and even in 2025 when it often felt like nothing was making progress. This is a photo of one of many, many, many immense new solar farms in the deserts of China. This is just a header image, just an intro. One of the many interesting trends I'm writing about is that more and more research is finding that putting solar panels in deserts actually increases biodiversity. It provides a little shade, a windbreak, more moisture can gather in the shadow of it, stuff like that. So there's probably more stuff living under these than there would be if the solar panels weren't there. Just little plants, insects. Studies are finding there's more of them under solar panels than in deserts without solar panels. So I have four major chapters in the presentation today: energy, emissions, the biosphere, and resilience. And I'm just putting the links to my two newsletters, my personal one and the one I write for Climate Action Now, which share a lot of content and subject matter. And without further ado, let me launch into it. I think, and I've thought for years, and I think the data more and more backs this up, that the defining trend of our age, the reason people will remember the 2020s 100 or 1,000 years from now, is that this is the decade that renewable energy is becoming the cheapest source of electricity in human history. After decades of painstaking work, electrotech, as the Ember think tank calls it, is now much, much, much cheaper than fossil fuels. And as you'd expect, worldwide, almost all the new electricity generating capacity getting built is renewable because of this. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter if you're someone trying to build the cheapest thing for their company or the cheapest thing for their national dominance or the cheapest thing for their backyard. The cheapest option almost everywhere is going to be renewables. Over like 80% of all new built capacity has been renewable everywhere in the world for the last couple of years. That was last year when this chart was made. And it just keeps growing. This is global solar installations you, over the course of a year, like starting in 0 at January, how far it gets over the year. So under 200 gigawatts of solar were installed, slowly going over the course of the year, the bottom line here in 2021. Just under 600, a threefold increase in 2024. And 2025 topped out at like, I believe, a little higher than that. So we are just seeing consistent record-breaking increases in solar installation every year for the past 5 years and counting. For context, the world had 398 gigawatts of nuclear power capacity total at the end of 2024. All nuclear power plants everywhere in the world, France, China, the US, everywhere, added up to 398 gigawatts. There were at 380 gigawatts of solar installed in the full 6 months of 2025. The amount of solar capacity installed in 6 months in 2025 is about as much as all still operating nuclear capacity ever built. There is just a massive, like hard to comprehend amount of clean energy being built. And a big part of the reason why you probably haven't heard about this as much as it seems like it warrants is because most of that is getting built in China. For the past several years, China has installed considerably more solar capacity than the rest of the world combined. In the first half of 2025, China installed more than twice as much solar as the rest of the world combined. And the really interesting thing there is a lot of the right side of this graph, the blue parts of the rest of the world solar installations, which are also still growing and would look quite impressive if China wasn't growing much, much faster, a lot of the solar being installed by the rest of the world is made in China. So it's really more like 80 to 90% of all the solar panels in the world are coming from China, whether they're being deployed in China or some other area. And what that's added up to is this is total electricity generation, not capacity. Electricity generation and capacity are subtly different. They're the center of a lot of arguments, but on either scale, China's kind of blowing us out of the water. Like, this is electricity generation, like actual production, and the crossover point was around 2010, and China now produces like close to uh, closing in on 3 times as much electricity as the United States by now. And actually, solar power alone in China is getting close to outrunning all electricity from all sources in the United States. So that's where this is happening in a large extent. That's part of why you are not seeing so much about this in the US. A lot of the sources on this are happening in other countries. So like in the first half of 2025, China installed 256 gigawatts of solar. And the number two, so 256 China, number two after 256 was 24 gigawatts in India, and number three was 21 gigawatts in the US. So in that 6 month period, first half of last year, when we have full data, China installed 256 gigawatts, the US installed 21 gigawatts. And the thing is, that US number is still an increase. We are still growing solar, just way, way, way more slowly than a lot of the rest of the world. Solar is, in fact, even in the US, even under Trump, still a majority, and an overwhelming majority once you add in wind and battery storage, which complement it nicely, of all the new stuff getting built. There just should be way more than this getting built. See this 2025 bar of all the new stuff getting built. There are no new coal plants coming online. The White House is having to like strong arm companies with abusive power to force them to keep coal plants open. It's not economic to build new ones. But but wherever people get the chance, they're building solar. And there was actually way, way more solar than this canceled in the US, and tons of offshore wind too, and other stuff canceled by abusive power in the last year. But the minority of solar projects that they couldn't cancel are by far the leading source of new power in the US. Solar is just that good. And in the rest of the world, where we don't have where they don't have leaders actively attacking the greatest technological revolution of the age, solar's just going crazy. Solar overtook coal generation in the EU. Again, that's generation, not capacity, in 2024. In Australia, in October 2025, renewables supplied more electricity than fossil fuels on Australia's national grid in 2025. And Australia actually started, based on this, a new solar share program. They're doing 3 hours of free power starting July of this year, 2026, in many states, and moving out from there, many Australian states, where for 3 hours during the day, when there's tons of solar, power is free. People can charge their EVs and home batteries and then just have 24/7 free power if they have home batteries, which the government is also incentivizing to charge up during the free hours. Electricity bills are skyrocketing in the US due to an entirely self-inflicted electricity shortage. Much of the rest of the world is rapidly moving towards unprecedentedly cheap electricity due to the solar age. And here are some images of what that looks like in practice. These are all from China. There is just immense amounts of solar being built. This is with incredibly complex technological underpinnings to it often. These white buildings or battery substations. This is a technology with no moving parts that you can order up a truck of and put flat on the ground, and it generates electricity, which is a fundamental economic input for almost anything. You can grow crops under it. Agrivoltaics is increasingly huge. Wildlife can increasingly coexist with it. This is a migration of a deer species right near a solar farm. There's increasingly lots and lots of cases of wildlife solar coexistence and even and even benefits. Entire new landscapes are arising. And we are actually seeing, and I'll get into this more in the emissions section, that the rapid adoption of solar power is driving down fossil fuel use in China in a way that's having huge reverberations across the world. We've seen a substantial plateau in fossil fuel use in China for quite a long time now, and it looks like it might be starting to eke down, and they keep building more and more solar. Chinese fossil fuel use declined by 2% in the first half of 2025. That would That sentence right there would seem like a ridiculously utopian dream to a climate activist 10 years ago. Nobody expected China's fossil fuel use to be declining by 2% in the first half of 2025. China, ended up promising peak emissions by, 2030, and people thought it wasn't really going to happen. It was super ambitious. Solar has just gotten really good really fast. EVs are now this was last year. EVs are now more than half, including hybrids, of all new car sales in China, which is by far the largest car market in the world. The International Energy Agency forecast that this year there will be a global oil glut of 4 million excess barrels per day. The IEA also projects that China is now manufacturing more solar than the world needs, even in net zero scenarios. So the amount of potential we have the factories making solar panels we need to get on the right track. That's different in many countries. The US currently has something like 4,000% tariffs on Chinese solar panels. The fact that they're being made doesn't mean they're being used. The fact that they can be made doesn't mean it's economic to use them in all cases. But this is again a milestone where that would have been truly shocking a while ago. When I was a kid, this would have seemed like a utopian dream. Yeah, so yeah, projected Chinese solar manufacturing capacity in 2030 is 65% higher than what the IEA thinks is needed for net zero if we are trying to get on that track in 20 and be heading that direction by 2030. China's also exporting this. The value of Chinese foreign investment in clean energy factories. So not within China, China investing in building clean tech factories elsewhere. The value of that is now substantially greater, inflation adjusted, than the US Marshall Plan for Europe after World War II. This really is just world defining. I've seen it. I've seen it. I've been traveling a lot recently. I've seen it in India. I've seen it in Mexico. This is what the future looks like for most people, most places. The US has kind of built some metaphorical walls with tariffs and sort of a certain attitude where people don't believe that we can be behind on technology, but this is what's happening. And this is substantially outweighing the slower decline in fossil fuels caused by the current White House's desperate attempts to keep the fossil fuel age going and squeeze a couple more positive shareholder returns out of it. And to be clear, and I feel like I always need to say this, I do not like the Chinese Communist Party. I am aware of the horrible stuff they've done with the Uyghurs, with Taiwan, with Peng Shuai, Tiananmen Square, Tibet. I am not trying to propagandize for them, but China's 1.4 billion people, and a lot of those people are now working and engineering and deploying some really amazing technology that's really important for the future of the world. So that's what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to praise here. And this is what's happening. This is what the world looks like. So a lot of countries now buying all this stuff, Chinese solar panels and EVs, are now moving faster than the US in terms of renewables as a share of generation and a share of final energy, which is not just electricity, but all energy use, counting thermal energy use, burning stuff for heat, burning stuff in internal combustion engines, stuff like that. Countries like Vietnam, Chile, Namibia, Uruguay, Morocco, Brazil, Malaysia, Bangladesh are now ahead of the US on one or both of these metrics. We are just one example of the crazy, the frankly insane, in a good way, stuff going on is in 2024, Pakistan, not the government of Pakistan, the ordinary people of Pakistan, surprised the entire world by basically deploying more solar faster than anyone ever had, even in China. Well, more solar panels in Pakistan. Pakistan imported over 16 gigawatts of Chinese solar in 2024, and that brought solar to be the country's highest source of electricity in 2020, the country's largest source of electricity in 2025. That's kind of ridiculous. That's like building out another 20 to 25% of everything you had before in a year just from a bottom-up grassroots movement. Look at I don't know if you can see these graphs, but the yellow part here is solar growing really, really fast year on year, and then it just was below coal, fossil fuels, gas in 2024, and it just zoomed ahead of all those in 2025. Pakistan's now turning away some liquefied natural gas tankers from Qatar that they previously had ordered because they don't need them anymore. There's not as much demand. And it's looking like this all added together isn't as big as Pakistan yet, but it's looking like Africa might follow that same path. And if that happens, the whole world changes. These are the graphs of solar imports from China to a bunch of African countries in 2024 and 2025. Oh no, in fact, late the 12 months before June 2025, and we are just seeing rapid growth in solar adoption across Africa. This is not about emissions for these people. A lot of these countries have tiny, tiny, tiny emissions per person. They are not doing this because of abstract ideas about carbon budgets. They're doing this because this is now the cheapest way in the history of the world to get electricity, and electricity is really, really useful. And it's useful both on an individual level and on a national level. This is a carbon reef analysis of fossil fuel import dependence, actual and in the low renewables scenario. So they'll so this this is a this is sort of a complex counterfactual. So, like, looking at this, basically, the IEA thinks that if there were no renewables growth, if there had been no renewables growth, Denmark would likely now rely on fossil fuel imports for 64% of its electricity. In real life, it's now 16%. So, like, the UK would probably rely on fossil fuel imports. That's not even all fossil fuels. That's imported, having to pay out to buy from other countries would likely be 59% of UK electricity, and in real life it's 23%. The lower numbers here in all cases are real life. The higher numbers here are what fossil fuel import dependence would be without renewables. This has already fundamentally changed geopolitics. And this is a picture of what that solar revolution in Africa and what reducing import dependence and bringing electricity to very impoverished people can look like. These are all pictures from the work of AppTech Africa, a really truly extraordinary company, not an aid organization, a for-profit company started by two brothers from Eritrea with $18,000 in 2011, and then restarted after their entire inventory was looted in the South Sudan Civil War in 2013. And since then, they've managed to grow it to be an incredibly successful, profitable, fast expanding business, bringing solar to agricultural pumps, schools, hospitals, a whole bunch of stuff all across Africa. And this is fundamentally an incredibly logical thing to be doing as a civilization, because as this Embl graphic shows, Embl's this great think tank chronicling this revolution. The sun supplies more energy to Earth every 5 days than we get if we burned all fossil fuel reserves. So if we had a giant burn every scrap of coal, oil, and gas party, that's 5 days worth of sunlight. And we're only using a tiny part of that sunlight, of course. The Earth is not one giant ball of solar panels, but that just gives you a sense of the ballpark we're working on and how much more energy is available from solar than from fossil fuels. And I really love this graph. It's looking like this is kind of the biggest thing since the Industrial Revolution. The future generations may periodize history, as this lovely, innovative graph from Dan Walter, who I interviewed in December, puts it, as foragers, farmers, fossils, photovoltaics. Each of them is roughly 100 times leap in electricity abundance in how many units of physical work you can harvest per hectare. Energy from hunter gathering, and you can get way more calories than that from agriculture. You can get way more energy than you can get from muscle work powered by agriculture when you unlock fossil fuels. And now we're unlocking way, 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 way more electricity than that with solar panels. We are sort of moving from hunting for fossil fuels to farming the sun with batteries as the grain silos. This is, I'm really confident that this is way more important than even very bad and scary politics in many countries right now. This is a civilization level upshift. And this is starting to really change the course of global greenhouse gas emissions. 2024 or 2025, probably emissions math is hard, but we are at the very least reaching a plateau, and 2025 looks like it was the peak. So last year may have been the year that we got the highest level of carbon dioxide burned from burning fossil fuels put into the atmosphere. And of course, all the carbon dioxide we already burned is still up there. We keep adding more. It's still pushing the wrong direction, but it's pushing the wrong direction more slowly. And that is a big shift. And The ICP 8.5 projections, the sort of worst case scenarios of 10 years ago, seemed like sort of what we get if we kept doing business as usual as of the 2010s, kept burning coal forever. And that's now barring some negative feedback loops, which are a different issue. From shale fossil fuel burning, that's now pretty clearly not going to happen. We are not on track for like 4 to 5 degrees Celsius of warming. We're on track for something in the realm of 2 to 3 degrees Celsius of warming by 2100, which is still bad, but that is roughly cut in half the amount of warming that we expect by 2100 in 10 years, which is a big deal. And this is a quote from the Vodium Group, just summarizing what sort of the current best available knowledge on global emissions trajectories. While the world has likely avoided the dire predictions of a decade ago, if current trends persist, the probability of limiting warming below 2 degrees Celsius remains below 5%. So basically, uh, we have as of 2015 was a big year for climate because of the Paris Accords. Viewed from 2015, we have ruled out the worst case and the best case options for climate change. And, that's a good news, bad news kind of thing. We did not move fast enough to go below 2 degrees Celsius, to keep below 2 degrees Celsius, but that was viewed as highly improbable from the start, aspirational. And we are moving fast enough to make a big, serious difference. And it looks like it's going to be not as bad as it could have been, which may be cold comfort, but it's something. It's points on the board. It can feel, when you look at it, especially the American political context, that the climate movement has just failed over and over. But on a global level, all of this, the decades and decades of work in advocacy and engineering, the incremental investments in solar R&D in the US from the Clinton administration through the Obamas that eventually trickled over to China or induced demand for China to sell solar panels to the US and Europe. The whole global policy and technological realm has made some really extraordinary progress on fighting climate change. And yeah, China's CO2 emissions have been flat or falling for the past 18 months, which is insane, which is, again, something literally no one was predicting. Again, like this is like this is like the climate science equivalent of seeing a headline saying in terms of politics, this is like if you saw a headline saying, and Trump went to jail and everyone voted for the Democrats and everyone lived happily ever after. I'm, displaying my own partisan beliefs in that. This is a improbably good headline. This looks like climate scientist fan fiction. This is really not something people expected. And then yeah, and then yeah, okay, I there's an additional deep dive into China here. So clean power is now covering all demand growth in China. And like some sources of emissions are increasing, like chemical manufacturing, as China tries to be more self-sufficient due to tariff issues and stuff. But emissions from like the power industry, mainstream electricity, and transport due to EVs are heavily decreasing in China. So these are the sort of increases and decreases that are adding up to that sort of plateau edging towards a decline here. And this is potentially even more exciting. Oh yeah, and also this isn't happening because China isn't a rich country. China is pretty developed now. Chinese electricity demand per person, not just bigger because it's a big population, per person is now higher than in the European Union. New coal plants are still being built in large part because that's kind of a jobs program for sort of local Communist Party cadres. There's some internal sort of political dynamics where it's very easy to want to build yourself a new coal plant, but the utilization rate of the coal plants keep falling. A given coal plant unit in China now only actively burns coal for 51% of the time. And that is, again, what's contributing to all of this. And this is the one that I kept sort of teasing, but there was more China stuff to get through. It's looking like this is happening in India way earlier in their development story. India is also building tons and tons of solar, and they're also like a gigantic country with over 1 billion people. They're ac- actually, the China was the largest country. The India became the most populous country in the world in 2023. The most populous country before India was China, and the most populous country before China was the Roman Empire. So that's quite a big historical shift that happened in 2023. India outgrowing China. Um, so yeah, India's power sector CO2 fell slightly. The first time that it ever did that since its independence was COVID, but this is doing very strong Indian economic growth. Its power sector CO2 fell in the first half of 2025. So that's really, really exciting with carbon emissions falling by 1% year on year due to clean energy growth meeting all demand and then some. And the world's biggest solar farm by far is currently under construction in India. And India is both importing stuff from China and building lots of solar factories of their own. This is really amazing. So I actually got through that faster than I thought I would. I have a long habit of talking too much and trying to spin too much into that. So this is the energy and emissions story. And some of the other stuff I wanted to share was sort of some of the other things that are less directly linked to these sort of really world-changing exponential growth curves, but are also some positive spots in other realms closely related to Earth's climate, and that people who care about the climate generally care about a lot as well. One little notice, but really interesting study that came out in 2025 was that recorded extinctions of plant, arthropod, and land vertebrate animal species appear to have peaked about 100 years ago, and that the rate of extinctions has been decreasing in recent decades. So if you look at these graphs, like this is recorded extinctions of, obviously this is only the ones we know about, but recorded extinctions of all species, recorded extinctions of plants, recorded extinctions of animals, and then a bunch more final subgroups like aptenopterygians, order of fishes, tetrapods, all four-legged animals, all the way down to like amphibians, mammals, birds, lizards, turtles. And you can see like there has been a high level of recorded extinction throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, and in many cases there has been less recorded extinction sort of at the dawn of the 20th at the dawn of the 21st century. And there are many, 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 many stories of incredible people working their butts off to try to save species from extinction. The current populations of tigers, black rhinos, and giant pandas today are much higher than they were in the 1980s when all three of those looked at imminent risk of extinction. Not all species, but a lot of species are being heavily protected, and a lot of people are working really hard to fight the illegal wildlife trade and establish community input and community conservation and strong protected areas and captive breeding programs to try to keep stuff alive. And so, again, this is a bit like the carbon emissions chart. Any amount of extinctions are bad. The background rate of extinctions is likely really, really low, and this is way higher than that. But it looks like this is not just snowballing into an ever escalating sixth mass extinction. It looks like there is, in fact, even as climate change is starting to bite in the natural world, and there's starting to be some really disturbing mass drought and other impacts on even very wild preserved ecosystems, it looks like we are seeing clearly that conservation does work and can work.
Sorry
And
to
here's
cut
a,
in really quick. I just wanted
yeah,
to acknowledge that we hit our goal. We passed 100 actions, so great
awesome.
work, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and bump that up to 150. I know Sam has so much great information, so just keep listening and take the occasional action here or there. And yeah, back to you, Sam.
Yeah, and you all rock. People like you have contributed materially to all of these trends. Ordinary people working hard, trying their best to make the world a better place. And here's a really interesting trend that I've started writing about, and one other reason why often sort of the biosphere picture can look worse than it is. There is increasingly a lot of species that are examples of what's known as the conservation paradox, where a wild creature is endangered in its native homeland but is simultaneously considered an invasive species somewhere else. An estimated 27% of all naturalized plant species worldwide, naturalized being sort of a more generic term for invasive from somewhere else without sort of implying a negative effect, are also considered threatened in their native range. Like these are just three specific plant species. Um, like this agave species from Mexico is actually extinct in the wild in Mexico, but it's become naturalized in India. This little coastal flower in Europe is threatened in its native range in Europe, and it's become common in Canada. And this species from Central Europe has become common in Norway. This happens a lot all the time. There's tons of really interesting cases of this, and there's actually and this is just a really interesting emerging new dynamic that sort of is almost a philosophical one as much as a scientific one because it sort of challenges our ideas of what conservation means. If a species no longer lives anywhere it lived 100 years ago, but it lives tons of places where it never lived before, is it endangered or invasive or both? Like, um, the world is changing immensely, but not all of those changes are for the bad. Or at least when they are, sometimes there's on it. Sometimes two things that people think are bad offset to be not as bad. Sometimes something you think is an invasive species here is actually a lifeboat, a refugee, something surviving in your area where it couldn't somewhere else. And also, we're seeing, especially in developed countries, extraordinary rewilding efforts. The populations of wolves, black bears, pumas, and grizzly bears have extended substantially in both their population and range, substantial spatial and numerical recoveries since 1975. And this is not an isolated incident. We're increasingly seeing this as sort of a trend. There's speculation about sort of a natural sociological cycle, an environmental Kuznetsov curve, where as civilizations grow from being very poor, they'll prioritize industrialization and development sort of at all costs to survive, and biodiversity will likely decline. And then as they grow richer, environmental movements arise. People start to move towards valuing wildlife again, and you start to get a rewilding surge. And we're really starting to see that. And another really big 2025 item was the High Seas Treaty, which has been signed by like 150 countries, but was ratified by 60 countries, not including the United States, which no longer participates in most United Nations discussions. Um, but it is now international law in 60 countries, including France, Spain, Morocco, Chile, Vietnam, Indonesia, and China, which is the world's largest fishing nation. And what those folks have signed on to is a first ever legal framework to create protected areas on the high seas outside of countries' exclusive economic zones. Is international marine protected areas. And this is a map of some proposed protection zones, which will have to be agreed on in the UN. But at least now there's a legal structure to possibly create areas of the high seas where you're not just allowed to fish. Previously, the high seas was fair game for anyone to fish. You could only have protected areas in these sort of grayish EEZs. But now we can potentially protect a vast amount more of our planet. And that happened this last year. Again, the US was not part of it, so it didn't really make US news a lot, but it's a big thing and it matters. And this is another more speculative one. Um, there's a category of insects, not a taxonomic category, a sort of functional category called myrmecophiles, from the Greek friends of ants, which are insects that have evolved to live in anthills. And that's everything from aphids sort of acting as ants' livestock by excreting honeydew and being hoarded by ants, to beetles living as sort of living as living sort of garbage disposals in anthills. And there's been speculation that human civilization could become home to anthropophiles themselves, stuff that is not just managing to live in human cities, but is sort of evolved to live in human cities, is optimized to live in human cities, where the most natural habitat is on the sidewalk. And we're not quite there yet, although there's questions about whether some species like pigeons or rats might be close to that. But we are seeing more and more, lots and lots and lots of other species, big wild animals in many cases, managing to live and thrive in high human density areas. Just some examples I've written about include urban populations in city parks and within very high human density areas of red-shanked duke monkeys in Da Nang, Vietnam, calico wildcats in Cape Town, South Africa, red-crowned Amazon parrots in Los Angeles, which is actually a twofold. They are another immigrant species. They are native to Mexico, but they're heavily endangered there, and they're sort of quote-unquote invasive in Los Angeles, but they are actually thriving there, and that's the best hope for the future of the species. That's just a sort of example of why things are often different than it seems. Beavers will returned to London this last year. Platypuses have been reintroduced at the edge of Sydney. Brown bears in one Italian town or passing by so often, people have rebuilt waste disposal and everything and started an ecotourism industry. Howler monkeys in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Hyenas in Hawaii, Ethiopia. Otters and hornbills have returned to the parks of Singapore. There's a colony of little blue penguins in Melbourne, Australia. When I went to Mumbai in 2024, I saw I saw leopard tracks and a whole bunch of flamingos in a city home to like 24 million people, a gigantic Asian megacity. coyotes in Chicago, flute bats in Adelaide, Australia, that are actually climate refugees as well. The wildlands where they were living got too dry, so they flew into a park where there were artificial water sources. Cities are kind of built to be places where there's lots of food, water, and shelter available. And as there's more and more animal levels in the world and less of a general tendency to kill any animal that crosses your path, cities are becoming havens of food, water, and shelter for a lot of different species as climate change makes it harder to live in wild ecosystems. So I just find this to be a really, really interesting trend and one that we're seeing more and more. And also, and this is a really interesting thing, climate change is supercharging storms. There's more thermal energy in the atmosphere. The US was lucky this last year that a major hurricane didn't hit, but there were giant typhoons in Indonesia. There's um, atmospheric rivers, floods and droughts, melting ice, general climate chaos already happening. If you're listening to the Climate Action Now video, you probably already know a lot about it. But so far, what we're seeing with this climate instability is more destruction, but less death. This is an example of what I mean. Um, in 1970, a Category 3 cyclone hit Bangladesh, which was then West Pakistan. It was an utter atrocity. Well, atrocity implies intent, but an utter disaster, a horror. Over 300,000 people died. Substantial parts of the entire country flooded. And there was no warning, no satellite photos of this hurricane, no text message alerts, no anything. So tons of people died. This actually led to the Bangladeshi War of Independence because people were so angry that the Pakistani government had completely badly handled this. And then, after Bangladesh was independent, a Category 4 storm, so a bigger one, hit in 1991, but only 138,000 people died. Then, the age of the internet. And even if you have one crappy, like text only Nokia flip phone per village, that's enough for you to get a message that there's a typhoon coming and you should head to higher ground, or a cyclone coming and you should head to higher ground, which is more than there was in the 1970s. So, with a roughly similar storm, a Category 4 storm killed 138,000 people in Bangladesh in 1991, and a similar Category 4 storm killed 4,000 people in Bangladesh in 2007. And since then, there have been multiple Category 4 and 5 cyclones, and none of them has killed more than 200 people. Bangladesh has built one of the best early warning flood networks in the world. People have switched from chickens to ducks because ducks float when there's a storm. People have built little community heaps of mounded earth with a schoolhouse or something on top of them that everyone collects at when there's a flood. Even if there's one phone per village, people know now to listen to that pulsar when there's a weather alert. There are floating platforms built, boat rescue networks. Bangladesh is getting hit by worse storms than ever. Category 5 recently, and it is killing orders of magnitude fewer people than much weaker storms did in the 70s. So storms got worse, but people got safer. And that is a really extraordinary trend. You may have heard of this is a not uncommon trend worldwide. 2025 was among, I think, the top 3 or top 5 years for monetary damage due to natural disasters in the US. You may have seen NOAA's $1 billion disasters reports. Lots of stuff got destroyed, but 2025 also saw very, very low deaths from natural disasters worldwide. In another sort of way to sum it up, I would bet on much worse storms and more chaotic weather and more floods and droughts and hurricanes on Earth in 2050, but fewer people dying from them than now. And this is sort of a mega look across lots of different categories, not just climate impacted ones, but also some others like volcanoes and stuff, of what total death toll from natural disasters often looks like. And in the 20th century, amid all the world wars and stuff, there were some truly massive natural disasters. The 1931 China floods killed 3.7 million people. The floods and famine associated with the Great Leap Forward under Mao killed 2 million people in 1959. Indian famine in 1965 killed 1.5 million people. And we are now much, 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 much less than that. Our civilization is more resilient. Even as external conditions get worse, we are getting better at handling them. And that is sort of a complex double vision to see, because when you see something like the LA wildfires, or that time where a typhoon or a cyclone hit the city of Beira in Mozambique and then another one hit it like a couple months later, these disasters and people losing everything, it's terrible, but it probably would have been a lot worse if people didn't have like a a weather forecast beforehand to prepare at least a little bit, or if there wasn't corrugated tin instead of wood or bamboo to build a roof out of, so it's less likely to get crushed when if something falls on it. In tons and tons of ways, we are getting better at not dying in natural disasters. And since there are getting to be a more chaotic atmosphere, that's likely to continue or at least not increase back to 20th century levels, even as the natural disasters get worse. And one big overlapping trend here in sort of building civilizational resilience is that we are getting ridiculously good at farming. And a lot of this is in ways that has big, bad, negative side effects. And I'm not even talking about animal factory farming here, which is deeply morally atrocious for reasons that have relatively little to do with climate change and are primarily about animal suffering. I'm a vegetarian. I feel strongly about this. But even just zooming in on basic staple grains and some other stuff, we are consistently seeing, again, even as the weather gets more chaotic, record high yields of basic staple crops like corn, soybeans, rice, wheat. And a lot of that's 2025 saw record high global harvests in a lot of these. And on every single continent, actually, food supplies, as measured in calories, have grown substantially faster than the population. And what's interesting about this, I actually just wrote an article and I have an upcoming daily dose. That's a mix of high tech stuff, Canada, like many other places, is seeing record high big grain production in its prairie provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. But a lot of those places have way worse weather conditions than they did 30 years ago. Droughts, occasional storms, less available water, but they're producing more grain anyway. And some of that's high-tech stuff like self-driving tractors and genetically engineered crops, which are great, by the way. One of the biggest mistakes the environmental movement ever made was to attack genetically modified crops. They've been super helpful in all of this. Um, Companies like Monsanto did bad things, but the technology itself has been immensely helpful in building global resilience, and it is a major reason why we have more food than ever, even as the weather's gotten worse. Um, so so some of it's high tech stuff like that, but also some of it's backing off in certain other areas. Like no-till farming is now more than 70% of cropland in Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, and that's allows more soil organic matter to build up, allows more microbes to live, allows more erosion resistance and root networks and stuff to survive, and that is a lower environmental impact that turns out to also lead to higher food production.
I
And
just
then,
I just wanted to quickly jump
yeah,
in, sorry to interrupt, and celebrate that we hit our goal again. Great work, everybody. We are well over 200 actions now. So I'm not going to update the goal again. I'm going to leave it here, but feel free to just keep taking action and we'll see how far we can get in the last few minutes of this event. Thank you all so much.
awesome. Yeah, I'm pretty close to wrapping up, so maybe we'll have time for that video Brett mentioned after all. And then, so what we're talking about here in this resilience section are some of the major vectors by which we were afraid that climate change would kill people. Natural disasters and weather screwing up agriculture. And a big third one was mosquito-borne diseases, expanding the range of diseases like malaria that were once common in places like Rome and much of the world where it isn't now and are now mostly killing people in sub-Saharan Africa. And sort of parallel to, and this is much less of my area of expertise, but I've seen enough to know it's amazing. Parallel to what we're seeing with the solar and battery revolutions, we're also seeing a biotech revolution with mRNA vaccines in particular and some other stuff. And a big part of that is the invention of malaria vaccines, which just weren't a thing 20 years ago, but now are. And despite, again, anti-vaxxer politics in some countries, they are being rolled out. The Serum Institute of India is manufacturing tons and tons of vaccines for Africa. In 2025, Mali became the 20th country in Africa to deploy malaria vaccines in their childhood vaccination efforts. The, Mali is one of the nations worst hit by malaria, so this is likely going to save thousands of lives and avoid suffering for millions. This is one of the biggest things happening in the world. It is atrocious and will probably kill lots of people that the current psychopaths running the United States cut funding for international aid. But other people are still really striving to help some of the poorest people in the world avoid horrible, unnecessary suffering. And this is the first Ethiopian child to receive a malaria vaccine, which is earlier this year. So we are building out what just due to sheer economics way, way, way more of the kind of electricity that we know we need if we want to run our civilization in a way that doesn't cause catastrophic climate change. We're seeing that already making a difference, not fast enough, but a lot faster than we thought possible before in the amount of warming expected. We're seeing slight declines in rate of extinction, even though that's still too many extinctions. And we're seeing some really interesting new ways that animals are living and humans are managing to live in a way that coexists with animals. And we are seeing, even as there's more destruction, there's less death from natural disasters. We're still seeing record crop harvests, and there's a lot more fascinating farming innovation stuff in the pipeline. A lot of my daily actions are about trying to promote some of these new technologies. And the major diseases that people will worry would kill lots more people in a warming world, we're creating vaccines for them. All the bad, horrible news stuff you read about when you came into this meeting is still happening. But all of this is happening too. Some of the biggest, scariest trend lines in the world are starting to slow down or even turn around. And I think that's pretty amazing. And we saw even more of it than usual in 2025. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sam. And I'll hop back in here to share a couple items for your consideration as we get to the end of this event. If you like what we're doing, please consider becoming a Climate Action Now member. CAN members are truly the backbone of what allows our small but mighty team to keep bringing you events like this. So we're very grateful for any support you can offer. I also invite you to join us for our next monthly dose of Climate Hope event. We're incredibly excited to share with you that for our February monthly dose, we'll be joined by Hannah Ritchie, who's a leading climate communicator with Our World and Data. You saw some of those graphics mixed into Sam's presentation today. And that event will be happening on Tuesday, February 3rd. I want to say thank you again to Sam for sharing his time and expertise with us for this monthly dose of climate hope. And I hope this 2025 review brought you some hope and insight on where we're headed globally. And most especially, thank you to everyone who joined in to listen. You're really what makes the difference with showing up to learn and take action at these events. Because we've got a few extra minutes, we're going to share a video that was created by Case Keene, who is the volunteer CFO of Climate Action Now. So if you'll bear with me for just a moment, I will get that video up and running. And feel free to stick around in the chat and keep discussing if you like before the top of the hour. For our panelists, we'll be opening our panel breakout room once this video is done for us to debrief.
So, Liz, could I jump in for just a sec?
Yeah, for sure.
Hi, everybody. Good to see many of you I recognize. And thank you for coming to this year in review by Sam Mady, our brilliant chief editor for the Daily Dose of Climate Hope. This was, by the way, I assume most of you have, I hope most of you have subscribed to that newsletter. It's on Substack. Liz can probably put a link in there. This was an idea we had, and we started a year ago, July, with 0 subscribers. And today, what is it, Sam? Over 25,000 people? Where are we? Or is it 20,000? You're muted, Sam. Anyway, it's over 20,000.
Over 26,000 now. Yeah.
Over 26,000 people so going like this. And what is the Daily Dose of Climate Hope? It's just a nugget of good news about climate that shows up in your inbox every day, Monday through Friday, along, this is really important, with an action that you can take. And we changed I noticed there was a comment in the chat. We changed the format recently so that if you click that picture of that action, it will take you to the action carousel on the Climate Action Now website, where you can take that action, in minutes. And I think we may actually put in a QR code so people can go into their phone, because some people, it turns out, prefer taking action in the CAN app. But this formula, if you will, of a little bit of good news with an action is a very potent formula. It's just taken off like crazy. It's being followed by the likes of Bill McKibben, and other climate leaders have taken note of the Daily Dose of Climate Hope. So I hope all of you will join me in becoming a subscriber and supporting us also with subscription dollars. It's a free Substack, but if you're in a position to help put something in as Sam calls it, our tip jar, that would be much appreciated. So Sam has really done and Sam is the guy who has really done this. You know, he's works tirelessly to absorb massive amounts of information, distill it, and then bring us these little tidbits of good news. So thank you so much, Sam.
Thank
That's
you. I would be doing this obsessively all night and working at some other job if I didn't get the chance to do this as my job. So I am incredibly lucky that there's someone who's willing to pay me to do this because I am really, 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 really invested in all of this, and I really love trying to figure out what's going on, share positive news, and do my best to encourage positive trends. So thank you all so much, and I am incredibly honored to be doing this job.
and Sam is an example of, you know, oftentimes people say, well, what can I do about the climate crisis? And I think the answer the smartest people give to that question is do what you do best. And in Sam's case, it's just reading, absorbing, and writing about stuff that's happening. In my case, I make software. So when I got involved when Trump took us out of the Paris Agreement the first time around, that's what triggered me to create the Climate Action Now app. Whatever you do, do it. Now, we've created at Climate Action Now a lot of ways for people to take action, to not only learn about what's happening, but to take action, first and foremost, with the Climate Action Now app. Most recently, some of you are learning that we have this new thing which we call the Can Action Carousel. Now, it's basically
Really
the
amazing
function.
piece of software. I've never seen anything like it. This is a sort of really amazing new thing that tons of people have worked really hard on building, and we're really trying to get it to be used because it could be immensely helpful.
Well, there's some things that are amazing about the Can Action Carousel. It's the same functionality, it's the same ease of use as the app, but it's right there on the website. Now, one of the things that's really amazing about it is that we will this action carousel, we will give it to any group that wants it. Any group with a website can install the Can Action Carousel on their website, 10 lines of HTML. They can do it in minutes. Liz and I and Amber just did this yesterday with Paul Kiesler, who's the chair of the Climate Reality New York City chapter. This is not a tech guy, and he would be the first to say this. Paul actually went onto their New York City website and he added the Can Action Carousel to their website in 2 minutes. And he hardly knew anything about how you do things with websites, right? So it is so easy. We've made it so easy for people. And since we started telling people that this is now available for free, we've had church congregations. I see Lynn Finelli has been in the audience today. Lynn has led a team with the Greenfield Presbyterian Church for years. They've been can doers with the app, and now they have published the Can Action Carousel on their church website. We've had Unitarian churches, Shaker groups, environmental clubs at universities, civic clubs, Green Austining in New York State have put it on their website, chapters of national organizations. It is free, it is easy. And guess what? If you have this action carousel on your organization's website, you will see an exponential increase in people taking action because, as we all know, if you've used the carousel, it is so much easier, so much better than the conventional advocacy tools. So Liz will put a link in the chat to a web page where you can go or you can send leaders of the groups that you belong to request the Can Action Carousel. And like I say, it's free. It will increase our impact exponentially. And guess what happens when we have thousands of organizations with this Can Action Carousel on their websites and with their tens of thousands of supporters taking action daily? We are going to blow the roof off this place, right? I mean, this will cause an exponential increase in citizen advocacy. So I know all of you, like me, I'm a member of Third Act Oregon, I'm a member of Climate Reality. You probably belong to multiple organizations as well. You belong to a church congregation, you know, maybe you're at a university. Oh, we even have a, I love
Or
it.
needless to say, or mosque or synagogue or whatever. Like we're just trying to expand to the most possible, literally any website by anyone who cares about climate change.
Any website by anybody
Yeah.
cares about. And by the way, I see Frank Coop here today. Also, Frank has a Facebook group, so they don't really have a website, but we can host. We are hosting his Cat Action Carousel on the Climate Action Now website. So even if you don't have a website, we can host an action carousel for you on the Climate Action Now website. And then we just recently, one of my favorites, had a request from a chemistry professor at a community college who wanted to have an action carousel for his class. So this is amazing that the amazing diversity of groups and organizations that are concerned about that and our democracy crisis are now asking for the Climate Action Carousel so they can get it out in the world, and we're making it available for people for free. So tell your groups about it. And if you have your own group, go sign up for one, and we'll do our best to get you in business really quickly. And it's super, super easy. So that was my last comment on this. I'm sorry we didn't have time for questions. As you know, Sam is encyclopedic knowledge of what's going on in the world, and we'll try to find better ways to make use of Sam's brain here going forward in the future. But for now, I want to end the hour with a video that just showed up in my inbox just before the holiday. It was created by Case Keene, who is our volunteer chief financial advisor. And so he's a volunteer, and he's also a musician. He's also a wonderful musician. He's also a wonderful artist. To thank you, I got your Christmas card, Case. It was gorgeous, beautiful. Thank you so much. But Case created this video. The lyrics are his, but he used some tools to create the music and what you're going to experience. So we're going to end the hour with this short video from Case Keene. It's called We Can by Case Keene.
There's a rhythm in the work we do, a rising chorus of me and you. From backyard gardens to distant seas, hope grows in the leaves of the trees. We teach, we reach, we light the way, a daily dose of hope each day, with hearts that care and hands that move. We're proving what a world can do. We can, we change the world, oh yes we can. Can doers raise their voices throughout the land, from solar projects to the trees we plant together. Clear technology drives the change we steer. Every action, every share sends a spark of hope out everywhere. At action parties loud and strong, heroes join and sing along. Every voice, every song keeps the movement marching on. We can, we change the world, oh yes we can. Can doers raise their voices across the land, protecting life where the wild things stand together. We can, we can. We plant the trees and hope takes root, protect the land and keep skies blue. Solar makes the future bright, powering dreams into the light. Deserts bloom, the forests sing, habitats safe, the joy we bring. From north to south, from peak to sand, we shape tomorrow with our hands. We can, we change the world, oh yes we can. The people raise their voices throughout the land.
And Can team, I'll see you guys in the breakout here so we can do a little debrief. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you all so much.